Good morning, and thanks for everyone taking time out of our busy days and weeks to show up. And we're going to talk about some what we're calling unsung heroes. So some of the behind-the-scenes aircraft. I also like calling them the utilities. So they earn their cred doing, oh, now it's getting louder. Thank you, John. They earn their cred doing utility work, liaison and stuff. And before we get started here, I want a shout out to our cadets who are joining us, taking a little time, and I appreciate that. Yeah, way to go. Way to go for being here and learning what we have and being part of this, and also for taking time out of your busy schedules to be a cadet in this great organization here. So let's move on. Here's what we've got in store for you. Today we're going to kind of run one by one down our three utility unsung heroes. So we'll talk about kind of the history of the type airplanes, the three different types, and then the history of our particular airplanes. And then we'll open it up to Q&A on each specific airplane. And we're hoping, as usual, that takes about an hour of your attention, gets us to about noontime. And then what we're going to do, we've got the aircraft kind of laid up where you can do a tour around and look into the cockpits of each of these airplanes if you wish to. Kind of the layout is you start over here at the Aircoupe and just kind of go counterclockwise, check out the beautiful Fairchild. We've got a stand up here that you can get on to look into the cockpit of the Navion, and then you end up the tour right in front of the cookies. Good plan. Good plan. Okay, so safety first, be kind of each other. Remember, I'm on a foot stomp. These are flying airplanes, so be respectful. We're not climbing into the cockpits, we're just looking inside. Okay, and it takes a lot of work to keep these airplanes flying. So you'll see that if you look inside the cockpit of the Aircoupe over there, it's undergoing some fairly major updates to the instrument panel. So we purposely wanted you to see that because it's not all shine and it's not all about the pilots. It takes a lot of work to keep these airplanes in current day safety flying status, airworthy status. So here we go. I'm Rob on the top, and we're going to split duties with Mike Hodson's going to talk about one of the other airplanes. So we'll start with our red Fairchild F-24. It was called the Forwarder in some of its military uses, and we're going to give a talk about this restored airplane. Okay, so it was designed, you can see up there, four-place monoplane. You can see it was designed in the 30s. So what was prevalent in the day in the 1930s? Biplanes. So here was an airplane as the aeronautical engineering was advancing, and we could go through engineering capabilities from biplanes to monoplanes. So this is kind of at the forefront. Light transport, four-plane, developed from previous Fairchild models. And here's an example. You can see a lot of the lineage. There's the Model 22. We have the Model 24. You can see some definite similarities between that. They took a lot of components to try and appeal to the civilian market. They took a lot of its attributes from the auto industry. So this airplane has windows you can roll down and roll back up. Right? They didn't have the power windows and power seats yet, but we're getting there. Okay, it was back in the day, affordable, very easy to maintain. And Fairchild had a really novel idea. They would leave it up, someone ordering one had the option of one of two different engines to put on it. You can see ours has the inline, the Ranger engine, inline 6. You could also order, if you were a radial engine type of guy, you could order it with a Warner radial engine. So that was up to the purchaser, the buyer of it. It was designed for unimproved grass strips. So that's one of the first bush planes. Think about today, those are super popular. A lot of them are tail draggers. You see them with the huge wheels on them, bush planes to go land in a wash, sometimes dry, sometimes not dry, out in the bush. There's one of the first bush planes so designed. Okay, you can see it was built in production for a fairly long period of time, and it became a very successful civilian and military aircraft. And that's why I call these the utilities. Okay, in the military service, it was actually the Navy who started it for our military in '36. There's a picture of it at the bottom. It's not in color, I'm sorry, but you can see the stripes. There's on the fuselage. They were also on the wings. Something the Navy and the Marine Corps liked to do back in the day was they would paint stripes around, especially the fuselage, green, orange, yellow, to identify what kind of primary flying that airplane was doing. You can see this was an instrument trainer. It was also a way to tell other airplanes there's a student flying this airplane, so keep your distance. Okay, so the Navy got it started. The Army Air Force and the Coast Guard flew them, and the Civil Air Patrol flew them. And they even put bombs on them and became somewhat successful at patrolling our East Coast in the early days of World War II to keep the German U-boats off of our shipping. Because boy, were we losing a lot of shipping back in the early days of World War II off our East Coast, as we and the British were trying to supply the British in the British Isles. The majority of the Fairchilds that were built did actually go to the RAF under our extensive and very successful Lend-Lease program. And of those, the majority went to the RAF's Air Transport Auxiliary component of the RAF, where they ferried pilots all around England and the British Isles to deliver airplanes, to move airplanes, etc. And there's a picture of an F-24 loaded for bear, ready to go find a submarine and attack it, and they had some success. And note my little parentheses down there. Does that paint job look familiar? Yeah. We have a heritage, so we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, post-war, small air charter operations, many were acquired. That's where it became very successful as a civilian airplane. Many were acquired post-war by businessmen, Hollywood actors and actresses of the day, so it became very popular because if you take the opportunity and look inside the cockpit of this thing, it's beautiful. I mean, it's kind of like a luxury Rolls Royce. Key operators, all of the services, all of the different services in the U.S. use them. We talked about the Civil Air Patrol use them in combat roles as well. British Commonwealth, South Africa, and Argentina. I'll foot stomp Argentina. Remember, Richard, remember Argentina. Survivors, the best I could find, we have about 25 total, and that's around the world, and about 10 of them are airworthy. That's not too many of these things that are airworthy. There's a good photo of one in RAF colors. Some specifics about it, fairly light. You can see the inline, the one we have, 6-cylinder, 175 horsepower. It's got a VNE's velocity, never exceed, of just under 140 miles an hour. Cruise speed, about 115, so not very fast. It could go about 400 miles if you had the butt to last for 400 miles. And about 2,200 of them were built. So here's ours. Ours was built in 1946. It was not used by any of the Air Force, the U.S. military. So Richard, where did it go? Argentina. I set you up. I set you up to succeed. Okay. So it went to the Argentine Army, And if you look, if you do the math, right, there may have been some other uses in there, but from 46 to 68, it was in use by the Argentine Army. So that's a good long life in a military service. Sold to an Argentine aeronautics club, and it again spent another 20 plus years doing service there. And then a gentleman from Oakland purchased it, and he started restoring it. And we had, as we became interested in getting an F-24, we had a CAF SoCal member who lived in the Oakland area, and we asked him to go take a look at this thing. So he knew Mr. Trilla, and he went and he took a look at this thing, and his report back to us was this guy had done a really excellent job of restoring to the state that he had gotten it. Excellent job on the fuselage. The empennage, vertical and horizontal tails were all done, and he had even overhauled the Ranger engine. So the report back was, this is a good one, get it. So we did. So we got it in 04. We started on a 12-year restoration to what you see, to airworthy status. The red and cream paint job goes back to that Civil Air Patrol heritage that this type had. Granted, remember, ours went to, where did it go, Richard? Argentina. Okay, so the cap markings and that paint job is accurate to Civil Air Patrol aircraft of this type in the 42 to 43 area. The patch that you see on there, that you'll see on the left side of the airplane, just forward of the cockpit, was a CAP squadron in Mississippi. And we have a lineage to that in that two of our members, Steve and Gary Barber, who are members here, we lost Steve a little bit ago, their father flew with that squadron. You can see his picture up there in Charlie's display. So that's why we have a direct connection to that squadron flying that type of airplane, painted like that, with that patch on it. So we're kind of proud of that. And if you look, we talked about it being a sub-hunter. So there's a B. He's looking through binoculars. He's got a bomb under his airplane. And look, there's a periscope, a submarine periscope, making a little wake in the water. How cool. So here's some pictures of the restoration. So fairly soon after we got it, just pretty much a bare fuselage. It's made of welded steel tubing for the innards of the structure, but then it has wood formers and stringers on it, which you can see pretty well here. Formers and stringers back there. Here's us getting ready to put the fabric on it. So it's fabric all around, except perhaps around the engine. The cowling around the engine is aluminum. So now you can see our team has properly secured that fabric around the fuselage and hung the engine on it. Now we've got it painted and we're giving it a little bit of sunshine. It needed some vitamin D, so it got some vitamin D. Took it out into the beautiful Southern Cal weather. I really like this picture, especially with our cadets in attendance here, because we have, here's Barry in the plaid. He was one of our restoration gurus. We have some old heads helping out, and then we've got some of our cadets involved as well, helping mount the wings on there. So a team effort. And there she is, ready to go fly. And there's the first flight, August 7 years ago. She's airborne. You can see the stringers as part of that fuselage. There are our two, again, real team effort, but we had two gurus who who championed this over this 12-year restoration, and there they are, Barry and Mike, who shout out to them. I wish one of them was here, or both of them, but they're not. Okay, so questions about our Fairchild F-24. Yes, ma'am. A little over 2,200. 2,232 is the number you can find on the website for how many were produced. No, that's more of a structural and how high is this airframe and engine going to get this thing and still be able to perform. If I understand you correctly, were there other airplanes of the 30s that would go up to 12,700 feet? I'm struggling with that. Let me ask our panel. We have a panel here. Jason, do you know what the service ceiling of the Stearman was or is? Okay. I think that's pretty common for the horsepower of the engine and the structural integrity of the airplane to be able to get up to just over 10,000 feet, yes. I wish Barry was here. I believe that's, you know, if we go back a bunch of photos, he was working on those a long time, but I want to go back to our combat. So yeah, there's no fairings on that picture right there, nor are there fairings on this Royal Air Force version of it. So I'm going to guess, I don't know, but I'm going to guess that in their research on how to make the airplane and how we're going to paint it, they found that there were an option to put fairings on those wheels, and they decided to do so. Okay, yes ma'am. $7. I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know what we paid. Okay, we're going to move on to our little white airplane over there, the Alon Aircoupe. It's gone through, this airplane went through, and its companies that built it went through many iterations, many different companies, so the name of the airplane changed with it. So it was first known as the Aircoupe, E-R, Coupe. Ours, built by Alon, was called the Aircoupe, and that's just a gee whiz kind of thing. But we have, and the YO-55 up here was one of the designations given to it by the military, when the military had a few of these things, which is important because its claim to fame was, as you'll see, I got a little clip coming up here, was doing the testing of the JATO rockets put under the wings, JATO, jet-assisted takeoff. Fairly common today on aircraft like the C-130 going into short, unimproved airfields, and you put the JATO packs on it, and it has almost a no takeoff roll to get out of those airports. But let's talk about our Aircoupe. Okay, adopted from the Aircoupe, as we kind of just talked about. There's a picture of an original Aircoupe designed in the late 30s. It was a two-seat light trainer, right? Pretty affordable back in the day, still in 2018. So I'm spitballing here, but there are some costs that are probably close to what we may have paid for this back in 2004. It was spin resistant. So that was one of its claim to fame and an advertising gimmick that the company used to try and sell them. It lacked rudder pedals. So all of the controls, both ailerons and elevators and the rudder, were all done by the control wheel. So you didn't have rudders that you moved with your feet. Very interesting. Okay, so the Aircoupe went on sale in the early 40s. There weren't too many of them that were bought and delivered before World War II. Some of them were flown during the war with our our military. The CAP used them, as you can see. They also patrolled for German submarines along our coasts. It was also part of the civilian pilot training program. How many of us were here when we talked about the primary trainers a couple months ago, where we talked about the PT and those things? Well, a lot of that training, as we were expanding our pilot training program in the early days of World War II to meet the requirements, a lot of that training was done by civilians. So a lot of the civilian instruction done in Stearman were civilian instructors. Sometimes they were government-owned airplanes, sometimes they were civilian-owned airplanes. 3 models of that airplane were used by the Army Air Force during testing. And you can see down here that one of them, and kind of the claim to fame, at least in the military, was it was tested or used to test this JATO, rocket-assisted takeoffs. And I think that's my next, so here we go, a little tech going on, bear with me. That computer right there now fits on your cell phone. So what I found in the research there is that a lot of that testing was done. Is that too loud now? Yeah, can you bring it down just a little bit, please? Better? Okay, a lot of that testing was done at March Field over in Riverside, what is now March Air Force Base over in Riverside. Okay, so post-war, Aircoupe, or Airco, cranked out these airplanes, almost like the war's mass production, John Lowe, cranking out 34 a day at one point. It was aggressively marketed in the civilian marketplace, such as in Macy's. So you're in there looking for a polo shirt and you buy an airplane. Pretty interesting marketing strategy. Okay, but in late 46, we saw this a little bit with this airplane too, kind of the expected post-war civilian aviation boom, kind of the bubble burst in 46. And so then that kind of started a trend, at least in this company, in this airplane, of sales. The company got sold to Sanders, they built some, then it got sold to Univair, and then to Forney, they built some. Interesting, that last bullet there, a city bought the rights to the airplane, thinking they were going to try to market their city as an aircraft, as part of the aircraft manufacturing industry. Okay, so there's an example of an advertisement for the company that you might have found in your local paper. Okay, and then along comes Alon. So they buy it from the city. right? They, a couple guys bought it. They put their letters together to name the company. And some of the improvements they made that you'll see on that airplane from the original Aircoupe was that sliding canopy. They put a more powerful engine on it, separate bucket seats, and then they improved the instrument panel. And so I'm hoping you'll go over and take a look, because that's one thing we're trying to do, is improve on that much improved instrument panel. Okay, they added rudder pedals. Remember that Aircoupe did not have rudder pedals. Everything was done with the control wheel. So they added rudder pedals to try and make it a little more traditional relative to all the other training airplanes where you were learning stick and rudder. Okay, production ceased, and then it was bought by Mooney, and that kind of the end of the tale for the Aircoupe as we know it. So some specifications, it's even smaller and lighter. Here's some pilot inputs on the cruise speed, right? You get 114 in cruise if you're going downhill with a tailwind. A stall speed, so that one's even lower, Sean, really down there. And if you're doing 100 miles an hour and you have a range of 450 miles, I'm not sure, you have to make sure that your rear end will handle 4.5 hours sitting in an airplane. And so here's the tail of our little bird over there. So it was an Alon A-2, so remember that chronology of ownership, the manufacturers of it went through 4 or 5 different companies that built it. Ours was built by the last company, built in '66. Kind of end game, it was donated to the CAF by the Santa Monica Museum of Flying, and that was through the arrangement of Dr. Randy Sherman. He was one of us. We lost him recently. Okay, and Randy had met that particular airplane in the 80s, purchased by one of his friends who flew it around out of Cable Airport, which is over in the Ontario area. And David, the owner at the time, loved the book called The Little Prince. So he had painted that caricature on the airplane. And if you go take a look, you'll see it. It's back on the airplane. So that airplane right there has a little excitement in its history. David was flying it back in the 80s and had a total engine failure in the northeast part. So I'm not familiar with Monterey Avenue, but he landed it on that stretch of Surface Street in the northeast corner of LA at night. Okay, David moved on, took the airplane with him to a couple of different spots, and obviously he accepted the 100-mile-an-hour cruise speed, but he at least wanted the airplane to look like it was going faster, so he put that paint scheme on it. And then again, he gave it to Dr. Sherman to operate through the Museum of Flying, who gave it to us in about 2000. So we've had it a little over 20 years. And in the time it was flying with the Santa Monica Museum, there's Dr. Sherman, there's Randy, and his son Max, and they painted the Little Prince back on it. And they put it in that paint scheme, a little more traditional, other than that blue flame 300-mile-an-hour looking airplane that's only doing 100. Questions on our Aircoupe? Yes, sir, back there.
If there were no rudder pedals, you can't fly cross-country roles. How do you land it cross-country?
It's interconnected, and it has, by the specifications, a 20-knot crosswind component limit, which is more than I'm going to land a tail dragger in. Yes, Mike.
Okay, so here we go. So notable females in aviation. So we have a picture of a young lady. She was born without any arms, and she wound up learning to fly. She learned to fly in an Aircoupe, whatever you want to call it. And there's a picture over there. She learned to fly. She was able to fly the Aircoupe because she was able to steer the airplane with her feet. She would use that on the control wheel. She didn't need to use her feet on the rudder pedals as there were none. So just an interesting little photo. There's a picture of her over there if you're interested. She was quite a determined young lady that wanted to learn how to fly without arms. So anyway, there's a picture of her. Okay.
Excellent. Don't go too far, Mike. Okay, thank you, Mike. Very interesting. And Alan, somehow she learned how to land it in a crosswind. Okay, thanks. Moving on. Next up is Mike Hodson, who just regaled us with that great story, and he's going to talk to us about the Navion.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. The first thing to say about the Navion is the proper pronunciation of the name is Navion. It's something that I have a bit of a fixation on. So Navion, there's actually a bulletin from North American specifying that the correct pronunciation is Navion. A lot of people say Navion. Well, that's not what it is. So we'll talk a little bit about the history of the airplane. So next slide, please. You can see originally built by North American, later by Ryan. The people, Ryan Aviation, Ryan Aeronautical, the people that built the Spirit of St. Louis, famous airplane that was flown by Charles Lindbergh. They're down in San Diego still building drones. So we talked a little bit about the Aircoupe being expected to supply pilots with airplanes after World War II. There was a thought that there was going to be a huge general aviation boom after World War II. The guys coming back from the war, I'll say guys because it was all males in combat. The guys coming back from the war were going to want airplanes. They had flown airplanes, seen what they could do. Many of them came back and said, I never want to see an airplane again. I lost too many friends. I saw people get killed. I don't want to ever see an airplane again. I want to go back to my dentist's office, back to my pharmacy, back to my bank, whatever. So that post-war anticipated aviation boom never happened. The Navion was created to supply that hoped-for boom. Not many were sold. There were some that were built by North American, some that were built by Ryan. So the United States Air Force, Army Air Force, used it as a liaison airplane. It was christened the L-17. That's how our airplane is painted to represent an L-17, L for liaison. So the Navion, more advanced than most civilian light aircraft. It was all aluminum, push-pull rods for the controls, et cetera, et cetera. Aluminum sheets riveted to aluminum formers, which was kind of a novel production thing. That North American had built the P-51 Mustang, B-25 bomber, et cetera, et cetera. So their production techniques were quite advanced. They'd done that all through the war. The Navion competed with the Beechcraft T-34 Mentor for a training contract. The T-34 won the Beechcraft product. North American lost the competition. So Beechcraft wound up building a lot of T-34s. We have one here, you can see it. The U.S. Army and the Navy both used it as a primary trainer. There were about 2,600 Navions built altogether by the two companies. Excuse me, not a big number over a long production span, over 30 years. The picture underneath the bullets here, a twin Navion. So North American experimented with having a two-engine version of the airplane, never went anywhere, was not a success, so there was only maybe one or two built, that was all. Okay, so very interesting photo. Here's a Navion on board an aircraft carrier. You can see Hellcats on the deck of the ship with a Navion. So they thought maybe they could build a U.S. Navy version of the aircraft for maybe a trainer or whatever. They built one that was used in carrier trials. Never went anywhere, never went into production, but it was an interesting thought by North America to try to get some of that business. So our airplane, November 91644, was built by the North American factory. test flown in 1946, December of 1946, visited many airports in Southern California. It was traveled around a lot. It was bought by a gentleman in Oxnard, kept in Oxnard for many years, Mr. Morley Chase. Morley and his family enjoyed the airplane for many years. Eventually, sadly, Mr. Chase passed away. His wife kept the airplane. She kept it at Oxnard, didn't fly it very much, if at all. And then eventually, she got tired of paying hangar rent, insurance, maintenance on the airplane. So she called and offered it to us and said, if you want the airplane, you can come and get it. You can have it if you'd like it. So we went over, we did an inspection. Mr. Chase had taken very good care of the airplane, done an excellent job of maintenance. So we went over, we looked at it, we said, okay, we'll take it. We did an initial inspection, changed the oil, flew it over here. It's been here ever since. So we're enjoying the airplane. Check my notes here. 1967, Mr. Chase had the airplane modified. He put a 225 horsepower engine on the airplane. The original had a 185, so it gave it a little more performance, not a lot, but it was okay. Excuse me. Okay, the airplane was formally registered to the CAF in 2017. It got formally registered to the Commemorative Air Force. The new paint scheme, which you see on the airplane here, would have been used on the airplane if it was an L-17 Air Force airplane. We chose to paint it in the colors of the 414th Fighter Group. That was what the fighter group was based here at the Oxnard Air Force Base, as it was known in the 40s and 50s and 60s, now the Camarillo Airport. So you can see if there's a logo on the tail, you can see it there. The logo, you can see it on the tail of the airplane in the photograph and on the aircraft. 414th Fighter Group, so it would have been supporting the 414th Fighter Group if it had been in the United States Air Force, if it had been based at the Oxnard Airport, Oxnard Air Force Base, which it never was. So, okay, so we're enjoying the airplane, we're flying it, and it's a great airplane, lots of fun to fly, rugged, dependable, smooth flying, very nice. That's it for the history of 91644, our Navion. Thank you. So, does anybody have any questions on our Navion or Navion? Yes. Yes, it's going to be on the ride program. The challenge has been thus far to find a suitable group of pilots that are currently trained in the airplane so we can put it on the ride program. Anybody, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, great. So let's wrap it up. And please remember, we're hoping you will take the time, since you're here, of checking out all of the cockpits of the 3 airplanes. And you can do that on your own, self-guided. Or if you give me just a few minutes, then I'll see you guys over there and kind of show you around and answer any further questions as you're peeking in. So we're a month or two closer. We're still tentative. So Charlie Plum is a globally renowned speaker, motivational speaker. He was a Vietnam prisoner of war, and he ties some of his experiences and some of the skills that he used to survive that ordeal, and he ties those into, you know, the ups and downs of every day and every week life of us. So if that happens, and again, please grab some kind of way to get in touch with us, because it's still tentative. And if it happens, don't miss that. Don't miss that. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about next year. Oh, yeah. Yes, sir.
The S-6F Hellcat is a plane I flew during World War II.
we have a veteran with us. Do you want to? Sir, do you want to come up and talk to us about your experiences? Or can I get your contact information, and next year we're going to talk about that airplane right there and the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Then you can lie all you want to. Okay. Please don't leave without me getting some contact information, if that's okay with you guys. And welcome. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm a little speechless right now, so let me gather myself. So we talked about Charlie Plum. So don't miss him. And yes, Dave.
Charlie just got a ride with the Blue Angels on his 80th birthday.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So he's there now, right? The Blue Angels are doing their homecoming show at Pensacola out in Florida. And so Charlie's there, and he really is globally known. And so you can see, not everyone gets a backseat ride in a Blue Angel F-18. Thanks, Dave. I'm even further speechless here. I need a shot of whiskey. Okay, so I'm going to foot stomp. So here's our first one. It's in the books for next year, February 24th. This is Dan Petkunis. That's him as a young man in Vietnam. He was a backseater of an F-4, and he's going to come talk to us about some of his Vietnam stories. And this is a further look into next year. So we talked about the top one. Let me go real quickly. In April, we're going to talk about our Zero, because it's the 85th year since the first flight of the Zero. Okay, a really interesting, this is George, it's hard to see, but he's standing by an Avenger, a TBM Avenger, and he is a independent filmmaker, and he's done a couple films on Navy airplanes. For those CAF members, he was over at Air Base Georgia in late last year, and he did a piece on their SBD Dauntless, the dive bomber. And he was on our ramp in August taking pictures and some videos of our Hellcat, because he did a documentary on Air Group 11, which flew Hellcats off of, I believe, the USS Essex. And in his research, fortunately, he found that there were 11 surviving members of Air Group 11. And in the process of that, he learned about Commander Schrader, who was listed as missing in action from late 44. And the story involved that this gentleman had two young daughters. I mean, they were not much more than infants back when he deployed, and he had given each one of them teddy bears. And he deploys, and he never comes home. And as part of the research that this George Ratellis did for Air Group 11, and then on the Schrader project, Commander Schrader, pieces fell into place. And the military organization who every day is charged with going out and finding our missing in action, and they were able to identify him, Commander Schrader. So his remains had been found, but they didn't know who he was. So he was buried in Honolulu, but now they could identify this organization. A lot of the work George did, they said, that's Commander Schrader. So he now has a marker on his gravesite. They know who he is, and at that ceremony, the youngest daughter was there with her teddy bear. And he's going to come talk to us about his research and what he's found to produce these documentaries. Okay, we kind of have a big one in June, D-Day, 80th anniversary of D-Day. We're going to have our PBJ. This is Ali. Ali is a current RAF fighter pilot flying the F-35 at Edwards. And he's going to come talk to us about his journey and the F-35. Okay, Captain Crozier is a retired Navy captain who was the commander of the USS Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier, and he's got a book out, and he was instrumental in the early COVID days, and he's going to come talk to us in August. And then, sir, in October, late October, is the 80th anniversary of the massive naval battle of Leyte Gulf, where from the air perspective, the Hellcat did some yeoman's work. So we're going to talk about our aircraft and the Battle of Leyte Gulf and you. October. Remember, that's Mr. Argentina right next to you right there. Okay, and then closing out the year, we have a gentleman who's been connected with us in one way or another for quite a bit. He's wrote a book called Shot Down about a B-17 crew, and he's going to kind of close out the year for us. You know, if you can grab one of those brochures, please do. The first half of the year is pretty solid, but you'll notice even on this slide here, I have some dates that are in red because we're still working with those guest speakers on the exact dates. So please keep plugged into us if you're interested in any of those. And kind of as part of our D-Day 80th, this group, our first presentation this calendar year, we showed a video that this group, the D-Day Squadron, back in 2019, they went over to Normandy for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. They're going back. So however many, 12, 15 of these C-47s are going to travel from the U.S. back over to Normandy to take part in the 80th anniversary, and maybe Gino will be back there. He was there 4 years ago. And we're going to kind of try and follow them on that journey. Okay, so that's all I've got. I really appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's patience and great questions. Thanks for being here. If please go check out our cockpits of these unsung heroes, and have a great day. Thanks for being here.